good night. You all needed some juicing up, and you did it. I thank you very, very much. These days, as you heard all of them say it, when you get on the bus and you go out, you go into these little towns and you see these crowds of people, and the strangest stories turn up, and you realize how mysterious it is that different people wind up in different places. We went to Woodland, Washington. I went during the flood, and I was so impressed with the people I met there when I put out a book basically saying what I thought this election and what the future was all about. I wrote about the people I met in Woodland, and there was this couple, 70-year-old couple that had been married forever, and they moved into this nice house, and they lost everything they had. Just everything. They were flooded out. And when I walked into their house, the basement was completely flooded still. You walk down the basement. So this guy, this droll, never cracked a smile or cried or anything, he said, I'm really glad to have the president here, and I'm so glad that by the time you got here, I had an indoor swimming pool for you. And then this man, instead of feeling sorry for himself and having all of his life effects washed away, he said, you know, people have really been wonderful to us, and it's a shame we can't behave like this all the time. I met a man who was an immigrant who was working for the local utility and had already retired, and he had 3 cracked ribs, and he was operating a jackhammer anyway, just trying to help the community get back. And after 8 hours of running a jackhammer with 3 broken ribs, well, I don't recommend it anyway. And we came to one community, and I met a man who served over 20 years in the Navy, and he gave me a silver dollar, minted in 1921, the year he was born. His father gave it to him in 1940 when he went in the Navy. He said, I've saved this for 56 years, and I think what you guys are doing is really important, and it's brought me a lot of good luck. I'd like for you to have it. I couldn't believe it. I met a man at one stop on the way that told me he graduated from high school with my mother in Hope, Arkansas in 1940. And he said, that's the last time I saw her. We had a double date in 1940. I said, well, did you behave? He said, I'm not telling. So I've had a great day. And Hillary and Tipper and Al have already said about everything that needs to be said. But I would like to, if I could, just try to briefly put all this into some sort of context. There are a lot of people here who have been active in politics forever. Senator Newberg, I'm honored that you're here tonight, ma'am, and I thank you for being here. You know what we went through in 92 and how wonderful it was and how tough it was in 94. And I thank you, Elizabeth, for getting on and staying for the whole ride. You're a brave woman. You're a brave woman and a good one. But a lot of this churning we've been through is somewhat predictable when you realize that we are going through a huge change in how we work and live, how we relate to each other, how we relate to the rest of the world. There haven't been all that many changes of this magnitude in the whole history of the country. When people really come up against challenges and they have to find a way to meet them consistent with the values that make their lives worth living, it gives some integrity and wholeness to their efforts. And that's really what we've been working to do. If you ask me what sort of 3 great ideas here are at stake in this election and how we view it differently from our Republican friends, I would say, first of all, we really do have a different view about the future. Senator Dole was quite candid when he said at San Diego that he wanted to build a bridge to the past. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way. I really believe that they believe that the future has got a lot of downside and not a lot of upside. And I just disagree with that. I think that the best days of this country are still ahead if we do the right things and build the right bridge. The second difference is how we view community. I believe they think that most of the time the best societies are totally self-reliant, where people are under no illusion that they're not on their own, that you are on your own. Maybe your family, not much else, except once in a great while when something terrible happens or emergency comes up. I think Hillary's right. I think we're better when we acknowledge that it takes a village and we try to make the village better. And then flowing out of that is this great debate about government. They have won lots of elections over the last 20 years and convinced a lot of people they had a lock on the White House by saying that the government is our enemy. That was Speaker Gingrich's whole line, that the whole culture of America had been destroyed by this overweening government created by the Democratic Party over the last 30-odd years, which tried to put the American people on life supports and weakened our economy, weakened our sense of self-reliance, undermined all of our basic values. You've heard it all 1,000 times. A lot of them really believe that. I don't believe the government is our enemy. I think it's a reflection of us. I think it is neither inherently good nor bad, but I think we need it as our partner because there are some things that we can do better together than we can individually. And that I think so if you look at all that in terms of the decisions we face today, you see how important this election is, the election for president and vice president, but also the election for the Senate, for the House. Our friends in the Republican Party are somewhat frustrated because they used to paint this sort of extreme little cardboard cutout picture of us, you know, that we were profligate and ran up debts, that we couldn't manage the economy, that we were weak on defense and foreign policy, we were weak on crime, we were knee-jerk on welfare, and we're just trying to throw as many people into dependency as that we could. Well, after 4 years, they're having a tough time with that because this is the first time the deficit's gone down 4 years in a row since John Tyler was president in the 1840s. Now, before you get too carried away with that, I should, in the interest of full disclosure, tell you that John Tyler was not reelected. But still, it's a good thing to do, bring the deficit. We've had 10.5 million new jobs, record numbers of new businesses formed, #1 in auto production again, record exports. So they can't make the economic argument. Crime rate's gone down 4 years in a row, they can't make the crime argument. Almost 2 million fewer people on welfare, child support collections up 40%, can't make that argument. So that's why you have this sort of kitchen sink election that we're going through, and why you've seen a lot of that kitchen sink for the last 4 years. What I want to say to you is that the answer for America is not for us to respond to them in kind, but to lift this election up and focus the eyes of the American people once again on the future, on moving into the next century with this country strong and healthy and vibrant and good. And the Vice President talked a lot about what we try to do to reinvent the government. It pains them, you know, they badmouth the government. I always contended the reason they never reduced the size of government is they needed a big target to kick around. So when we Democrats got in, we reduced the size of the government to the smallest it's been since Kennedy as a percentage of the workforce. It's the smallest it's been since Franklin Roosevelt first took the oath of office before the New Deal. But our government is strong enough to show up in Portland when there's a flood and do a good job. Our government is strong enough to invest in medical research that is more than double the life expectancy of people with HIV and AIDS in just 4 years. Our government is strong enough to lower the cost and extend the availability of college loans, to increase Head Start, to protect the environment, to invest in technology, to move this country forward. I believe that we got it right, and I think that is really what this election's all about. It's about whether we can build a bridge to the future with a sense of community so that we all get to walk across together, and when we get on the other side, we like what we see. That is really what this is all about. So there's still a lot of things to do out there because we are going through this huge transformation. Yes, compared to where we were 4 years ago, we're in a lot better shape. By almost every indicator, we are in a lot better shape. But we still have significant environmental challenges, significant healthcare challenges, significant economic challenges among people who've been left out. We have significant challenges in order to create a system of lifetime learning where everybody will always have access to advanced education when they need it in a way that enables us to grow and grow together and to have people find personal fulfillment. We have huge challenges still in helping families resolve the conflicts that nearly every family faces between doing your job and raising your kids. I hear it everywhere. And I think in some ways, the fight that I've had with Senator Dole over family and medical leave embodies what this election is all about. It was the first bill I signed. He led the fight against it, did his best to kill it with a filibuster, and couldn't get the job done. Then after I signed it, he said it was bad for the economy. Well, 3 years later, 12 million people took advantage of it when a baby was born or a parent was sick. And 10.5 million jobs later, 4 years in a row where we break the record for starting new businesses, he's still saying it's bad for the economy. It was a mistake. I'm trying to expand it to cover visits to your kid's teacher and regular doctor's appointments. And he thinks it's a mistake. Now, so the environment is another example. They let the polluters rewrite the environmental laws, and we told them if they did it, we'd veto it all, and we had to veto a lot of it. They cut back on our environmental investments. We have done a lot of things to make our drinking water safer, our food purer, our air cleaner, clean up toxic waste dumps. Yesterday, the Vice President and I had the great honor at the Grand Canyon to set aside a huge 1.7 million acre national monument in southern Utah, the Grand Staircase Escalante Monument. So, what I'd like to ask you to do in the 6 weeks and 5 days that are left is to go about your efforts to send Tom to the Senate and Darlene and Mike to the House in a way that elevates this election for people. And take some time every day, if you can, to search out someone who doesn't agree with you or is undecided or is under the huge illusion that it doesn't make any difference whether they voted, and talk to them about what's at stake here. You can get anybody's attention when you say the real issue is not simply the last president of the 20th century, not simply the first president of the 21st century, but what in the world this country is going to look like when our children are our age. The kids in Portland today, the children in high school in Portland today, within 10 years will be doing jobs that haven't been invented yet. Many of them will be doing work that hasn't been imagined yet. And I am confident if we can elevate this election, if we can make it big when they try to make it small, when they come up with their wedge issues, if we find issues that embrace people and bind us together, and if we keep throwing this election into the future and engaging people's imagination and their passion and their love for their children and this country, I believe we can prevail. And I want you to think about that. I could run this whole election with one-liners about Speaker Gingrich and Senator Dole. And they'd be good, and you'd want to stand up and shout hallelujah. But it was yesterday. It was yesterday. I could run the whole election bragging on what we've accomplished in the last 4 years, but that was yesterday too. In 1984, I gave a speech running for re-election as governor in a little country town. There was an old friend of mine leaning up against a tree in overalls, and I gave what I thought was a brilliant speech, frankly. I thought it was one of the best talks I ever gave. Told him what a great governor I'd been. And I went over and shook hands with this guy, and I said, how'd I do? And he said, well, that's a pretty good speech. He said, about what all you've done, but he said, that's what we paid you to do. You drew a paycheck every 2 weeks, didn't you? He said, what are you going to do if we re-elect you? And it was an interesting insight. What I want you to do is to ask people, what are we going to do in the next 4 years that will guarantee that the American dream will be alive and well for all of our children? What are we going to do in the next 4 years that will purge us of the last remaining vestiges of bigotry in any form that is bedeviling people all over the world. You look at the whole world where racial, ethnic, religious, tribal hatreds are a curse. What are we going to do to keep looking outward and reaching outward and dealing with the new challenges the world presents us so our children will grow up in a global village that offers them more opportunities to live out their dreams than any group of people have ever had? I believe that is within our grasp. I believe the best days of this country are still ahead. And I believe if we can have that kind of election, then our real celebration, when we can be really rowdy and totally out of hand, will be on November the 5th. So I ask you, I don't care what the polls say, we need a Congress that reflects the values and the vision of the American people at their best. We need to win this election in the right way for the right reasons for the future. And we're going to stay on the road. We're going to stay at the job. All of us are. We're going to give you our very best. And if you will give us 6 weeks and 5 days, we'll give you 4 good years you can be proud of, and America's best days will still be ahead. Thank you.